Hey, Matter of Opinion listeners, it's Michelle Cottle. We're taking some time off this holiday weekend, but we did not want to leave you empty-handed. So we have something a little different today. It's a fantastic audio essay from my colleague and fellow Michelle, New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg. Michelle spent some time last month with supporters of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to try and answer this question. If RFK Jr. is going to spoil the election, is he going to spoil it for Biden or Trump? Here's her piece.
I'm Michelle Goldberg. I'm a columnist for the New York Times Opinion section. I recently went to a rally for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in Oakland, California.
We need to sit with each other and listen to the feelings and not walk away and not see each other as enemies, but learn to love each other even through that anger and vitriol. We need to start coming back to each other as Americans again.
It was at the Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center, this huge auditorium that wasn't anywhere close to full, although there were hundreds of people there, people who had very eccentric politics. I witnessed one interesting exchange outside where somebody was collecting signatures to try to reinstate California's 3 strikes laws, basically to make criminal penalties stricter in California. And he went up to these 2 white-haired men who really blanched, and they were like, no, we're from the left. We have no interest in law and order crackdowns. One of them was wearing a button that said, "Ask me about 9/11," which I actually didn't because I didn't have that much time. Kennedy, it seems obvious, is going to play a spoiler role in this election, but it was very unclear to me who he was going to be a spoiler for. And in some ways, my favorite kind of stories are the ones that you walk into really looking for the answer to a question and kind of not having much of a predetermined view one way or the other.
What is the most important issue for you in this election?
The First Amendment, the freedoms, medical freedom, the people that are...
COVID was really the deciding factor for a lot of people.
The COVID lockdowns were something that was really important to me that I felt was unconstitutional. You shut down all of these small businesses and people are not recovering from that.
A number of people I spoke to had never been to political rallies before. One of them was Chris Inclan, a drug and alcohol counselor who had this sort of ideologically erratic voting history.
So it's funny. So I voted for Jill Stein, 2016. And then in the primaries, Andrew Yang. I felt like Biden was so ingrained in the establishment and politics as usual. So I ended up voting for Trump.
But he didn't really like Trump either. I mean, he basically felt like it was unfair. And in this, I think he speaks for a lot of Americans, that he just didn't want to have to make this decision again.
What's your name?
Jacqueline Fisher.
Were you a Democrat in the past, or were you independent?
No, I had been Republican, but became independent, several elections ago. Mm-hmm. I lean more towards libertarian.
Are you somebody who was attracted to, the medical freedom?
Yes. Yes, especially during COVID. It very hard. We couldn't go to church. All of these restrictions. I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So that's very important to me. Medical freedom, religious freedom.
If Kennedy wasn't on the ballot, who would you be voting for?
You know what? That's so hard. The lesser of 2 evils. But honestly, probably Trump.
Matt Castro is a bus driver in San Francisco.
I was so disillusioned after 2020 with the mandates, so I took a lot of vaccines. The 3rd one hit me quite hard. I just kind of went along with the herd. Big mistake, right?
He said that if RFK isn't on the ballot, he's going to vote for Donald Trump.
I just think that the vaccines, ultimately, they lied to us. They suppressed the truth about what was actually, they were given to the population.
There's an overlap between New Age wellness culture and the far right that goes way, way back. And I think in terms of libertarianism, there's a sense of nobody's going to tell me what to do. There's a fundamental distrust of experts. There's a weakness for quackery. People associate crunchy New Age culture with the left, and there's obviously something to that association. My guess is that most of the people at my yoga studio are voting for Democrats. But there's also this real strain on the right, and it's gotten more intense since the pandemic. There were definitely people at the rally who voted for Biden in 2020, but they were mostly people who had already decided to definitely not vote for him again. I don't think anybody knows the precise nature of the spoiler role that Kennedy is going to play. There's both a lot of pundits who think that RFK Jr. is primarily a threat to Biden, but there's also political insiders, both Republican and Democrat, who see it that way. I think we know from Kennedy's own remarks, from things that he said recently on CNN, that he considers Biden a bigger threat to democracy than Trump. So he seems like he would be happy to spoil the election in Trump's direction. But the other side of that is that he's going to attract people, presumably, who see things the same way. And those are people who would lean Trump if he weren't in the race. RFK Jr. is assembling this coalition of the distrustful, this coalition of the alienated. And there's a lot of overlaps between that coalition and Donald Trump's coalition. It's not precisely the same thing, but there's a lot of room in the Venn diagram where the two intersect.
I think most people think I'm different and weird for questioning. I think most people just want you to be quiet and trust the government.
I'd like to see them really taking on these pharmaceutical companies and the companies that are poisoning the water and all of that, so that we could have really a good generation of children. I think it was
I would say that his rally surprised me because it was a much more conservative or heterodox libertarian-leaning crowd than I had anticipated.
I'm more scared of the multilateral organizations, the WTO, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, because they have the money and the power, and they influence and pay off all the politicians of all the states in the world. You know, all the.
And it's tricky when you report on things like this, because on the one hand, it's true that anecdote and data are not the same thing. You can't extrapolate from the people who go to a rally about what the electorate at large is going to do, because people who go to political rallies are a very kind of distinct breed, right? Most people just aren't that into any politicians. But I also remember back in 2016 when I would go to Trump rallies and I would have this sinking feeling, this doesn't feel on the ground the way conventional wisdom says this election is going to shake out, and saying, but this is what the polls say. Having gone through that, I think that we can at least take something away from the texture of these actual events and the stories of these actual people.
To find more audio essays like this one, download the New York Times audio app and search for The Opinions. The New York Times audio app is free for Times subscribers. You can download it in the Apple App Store.